This bonus episode is brought to you by Simpplr. Simpplr is an AI-powered employee experience tool that streamlines work and supercharges communication.
Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Gose.
And I'm Jenni Field. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience, beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And I'm going to kick things off today by mentioning that this is a bonus episode in case you missed it at the very beginning. And this is something that we want to do more of in 2026. So we're going to keep doing our weekly shows that come out every Monday. But throughout the year, we're hoping to drop in some special bonus episodes along the way. Chuck, over to you.
Yeah. So as Jenni said, there are times that sometimes the weekly episodes just don't do it justice. We talk, 3 to 5 different articles. Every now and then there's something we want to dig deeper into, which is what we will do with these bonus episodes. And so it's my honor and privilege to introduce not only our guest today, but our very first guest on Frequency, Carolyn Clark, VP of Communications and Employee Experience at Simpplr. I've known Carolyn for many years in the communication space. She spent time at GoDaddy, Yahoo, and Opendoor. So Carolyn, welcome to Frequency. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be with these experts. You two are impressive people, so it's good. And friends.
We would like to think of ourselves as impressive people, Carolyn. So thank you. Thank you for that.
In our baby world of comms, you are definitely special people.
We're also very humble to Carolyn, as you can tell.
As I am.
But we wanted to have you on to talk more a bit about Simpplr and some research. So spend some time sharing with everyone about your experience at Simpplr and what you all do.
Yeah. So I like to say I'm on the other side now. I've spent my whole career, doing the actual comms, and I've been at Simpplr for almost 3.5 years. And it is really where, for me, all of the learning and the training has become applicable, because I'm actually in meetings with product people, dreaming up what happens, with the research team, thinking about what are the facts that actually matter. So I get to do all of that and get to talk about the product broadly. But it's just been one of the most fun parts of my career so far, because I can see the difference in the product based on comms people's feedback and my feedback, and that gets really exciting. But yes, we do a lot of research, and I know one of the things that's been a big learning for me, and Chuck, I know we kind of joked about there's these reports that come out, like the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Wave, and these massive reports that in insider information vendors like Simpplr spend a lot of time on. And I think I said this to Chuck when we were prepping for this interview. I had never even heard of those things when I was actually on the other side. And so when I started to hear about these things, I'm like, what in the Lord is this? And what it turns out is, when you, the comms people, aren't in the room, your IT people are looking at research. Better have the right vendors in there, and it does a lot of that work for you. So that's kind of the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Wave world. I don't know. Did you all know it? Have you all followed it forever? Is that a thing that most people know about?
Well, I think for me, when I first heard about the Magic Quadrant, it felt very Harry Potter-ish. I didn't quite know what it was referencing at the time. But to your point, Carolyn, I think it does give some teams a structure and a focus and a way to compare the efforts that companies are putting forth beyond just the buttons and the features and those kind of things. It actually tries to look at the overall spectrum. I believe it even includes customer interviews as part of a lot of these. So they really get the full perspective. So what were the results that Simpplr had with this year's Magic Quadrant?
This is our fourth year being named in that top of the quadrant, right? That's something to really be proud of. Is we've been in the top spot for as long as I've been there, as long as I've known Simpplr, they've been in that spot. And I think, again, for me, it's the validation that these are facts, right? This is an unbiased person who's evaluating all of these different vendors. And, we are all susceptible to marketing. And that's, the whole job of teams behind Intranets is to market their product. So having kind of an unbiased party like Gartner or Forrester give that, so that you, the comms person, can be like, this isn't just what my friends in comms say. This isn't just what we think is best or what we're being marketed, but this is, they're saying we have the best capabilities, we have the best strategy, we have the best innovation. That is really validating. And I think I would look at that now. If I was buying any kind of platform, I would definitely know who are the top three. That's all I really want to know about right now. So,
and I think that's a really great point, Karen, because I think some organizations, they might not be familiar with all the options that are out there. So this is a place to go look and see who are the ones who are cemented as a leader, who are the ones that are growing. And obviously we all, the more the industry grows, the better that is for everyone involved.
Yes, bring on all the products. My God, bring it all on. I mean, it's not all going to work, but if some small feature that some obscure intranet comes up with changes the game, then even the people in the top of that quadrant can learn from it. So I think the whole thing is only going to make us stronger.
Well, Carolyn, thank you for all the work that you and Simpplr do. It's great seeing you and great having you here join us on Frequency. Jenni and I are now going to dig into this research, the 2025 State of Internal Communications and Internet Report. With the research, we're going to talk about a slightly uncomfortable truth. Internal comms is getting more attention and even more budget in some cases, but the everyday employee experience is still shaped by a mess of tools, sometimes unclear ownership, and still the quote unquote, we sent an email as a strategy. With this report as a backdrop, I want to be clear that it's not an employee survey. It's a view from the people running comms, both HR, IT, and leadership. So what we're really digging into is how the builders of these systems think what's working, what they're saying is improving, and where the gaps are, and especially the gap between we have an intranet and what employees actually find, and do they find what they need. We're going to extract 10 findings that tell a bigger story. IC is becoming more strategic, measurement's still a little weird, tech is both the enabler and the bottleneck, and AI is showing up fast even while the governance and targeting might be lagging behind. So now let's get into the top 10, Jenni. Number 1, execs are paying more attention to IC. The report says 79% think execs understand IC's importance. It also says 58% increased IC budgets and 38% expect to add internal comm staff. I think this could look to, is this bigger budget stuff? Could this mean more stuff? Or is this we still focused on better outcomes? It's a good moment to ask leaders what they think they're buying. Is it beyond tech? Is it faster adoption? Is it fewer rumors? Is it focusing on churn, better manager comms? So Jenni, a question for you. If leadership is finally investing, what should internal comms do first so it improves employee experience and not just more output?
So this is a great starting point for this report. And I do think that I'm not going to answer your question straight away, which is always what I do, but it says 79% think execs understand IC's importance. And I'm really interested in that, because it's like we equate the understanding to more investment, not more time from the execs to actually improve the employee experience, which is ultimately what we need, right? We need the leadership team to be doing more around being more supportive, being more credible, all of those things. So if they're getting the investment, so 58% are saying they're going to get some more budget, the first thing I would do if I was given more budget would probably be to go and do more insight in terms of the different groups and different employee groups, and really think about, how do I really tackle some of those big challenges, like the frontline deskless workers, like some of those things that are the big things that have never come off the table. I would want to get more insight to be able to do that. That I'm working on the basis that I'm going to get increased budget year on year based on this. So then the second year I could then do maybe, I've always outsourced my team, so I wouldn't necessarily hire more people, but I'd probably build on the skills and resources that I need. What would you do?
Well, it's very British of you. So you get more budget, and then you're like, let's go do more research.
Well, I want to go.
The American in me is like, let's start buying things. Let's start doing things. I think for me, the red flag here is the 79% think execs understand IC's importance. We don't necessarily know that they understand. So that's a little bit of a red flag that I would call it. It sounds really good, but it's more important that you know that your leaders understand the importance versus thinking they know that importance.
Hence my more research to like tackle the different problems, right? Because you've got to get in there and really find out. I hate the I think. It's one of my big bugbears, actually, that like, well, I think this is what, do you? Or do you know?
Right. Moving along to number 2, customer satisfaction is the top impact metric for internal comms. The most cited business impact metric is customer satisfaction score. The report also notes that 35% of orgs with an intranet measure email readership. This is a bit of a fascinating tell for me, Jenni, that internal comms allegedly, and I want to use that term in here, allegedly is using an external metric that leadership already respects, but it also raises the, okay, but how do you know it was comms leading to the customer satisfaction? I think this is one of the first times that I've really heard communicators saying that customer satisfaction was something that they looked at. So Jenni, to you, what does it say about measurement when we're allegedly using this external metric and it outranks other like comms effectiveness metrics or other things that we're typically seeing communicators talk about?
So I think this is a direct link to some of the Gallup stuff, which obviously tracks employee experience and engagement into customer satisfaction. So I think there's something there where we're trying to pull that thread. I struggle to believe that internal comms people would say this. I'm not saying that it's not real. I'm really interested in the wording behind that to get to the answer of customer satisfaction. Like, was it like a list of stuff to tick and actually we've ticked 7 things because this is what it's done and that one's just been ticked? I don't know. So I'm interested in that. I think it shows a link possibly to more profit-driven organizations, maybe being more involved in terms of that, because I don't know that you would have that as a top impact for some of the more purpose-led organizations. So yeah, it's a few red flags for me.
See, this is one I want this to be true. I really like if this is the case, because we started the transition comms to looking at things like employee retention and some of these, again, other metrics that other parts of the business we're looking at. So I really do want this to be true, because if that's true, then it is sort of that happy employees lead to happier customers. And I know you love the term happiness, Jenni, but we know
I find it thrilling.
If the employees are engaged and supportive, then more likely the customers will also feel some of that down the line. So this is one of the things I'm not saying it's not true, but I really do want it to be true.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's jarring for me is almost like how far down the line it feels. So even if we think about any stakeholders, so you've got, maybe if it is more purpose-led, you might have donors or you might have supporters or different people like that. To have that as your impact just feels so far away from what comms people generally talk about. And if it is that, like you said, that's amazing, because we're really looking at an impact. But I just don't hear that enough in industry events and in other places to feel like that's a really core trend that's coming through. I mean, it's spot on with the data that we know from Gallup and stuff, but I'd love to hear more of that and the link between what they've done to get there at industry events and conferences and stuff, for sure.
Well, and maybe our podcast listeners will start doing that. Very same work, Jenni. Number 3, organizations with intranets rate internal comms higher. With an intranet, 30% rate internal comms excellent. Without one, 13% do. To me, the challenge with this, Jenni, is this is a little bit of perception, not proof. How do we know that this is really true? It could be that orgs who take employee experience more seriously also then tend to make that investment in platforms, but it's still a strong infrastructure matters signal. So Jenni, if you hear we don't really have an intranet, what questions would you ask next about how employees get what they need?
Well, I'd ask, how do employees get what they need? That would be my next question. I think that's a really interesting stat. And actually, frighteningly, I've heard we don't really have an intranet a few times in the last, I would say, 3 to 6 months with various people I'm talking to. And I think the biggest thing, the reason I think this is proof rather than perception, is that clarity and one version of the truth, which was always my thing about intranets, was we need to have one version of the truth. And I think when you have that, you feel so much more informed, and therefore you would rate internal comms as much better. So I think the question is always, if you don't have one or you don't really have one, how are people finding stuff out? And the answer is nearly always slide packs that are cascaded via email through the organisation, and then all hands town halls, whatever you want to call those all staff meetings. But the general consensus over that is that they don't work all that well. So there's a lot of gaps in terms of that collaboration and being able to work together.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here, I'm going to try to limit my hate of SharePoint in this conversation, but this is people that are handcuffed using SharePoint, and they're still saying that IC is excellent. Now, only 30% are saying IC is excellent. So still there's lots of room for the industry to grow when it comes to this, that we know that it has to be much more than just an intranet. So sorry, Microsoft. But, this is where that perception, not proof, we just need to be sure we're delivering great content and making sure employees have access to that content.
And this is a survey that's been filled out by comms people, right? So this is comms people.
Comms, HR, IT, correct.
Okay, so they're rating their own homework. So if you've got comms,
Correct.
HR, and IT,
Right.
They're all going to go, yeah, we're excellent if we've got an internet.
This is that perception, not proof part.
I'm doing
That
a
is
great
correct.
job.
All right, moving along to number 4, the intranet divide shows up in employee experience measures. This report links intranet presence to higher agreement on outcomes like productivity, 84% versus 67%, belief in mission, 78% versus 60%, and connection to workers, 75% to 58%, while noting it doesn't prove causation necessarily. But even if it is correlation, I think it points to something very practical here, Jenni, that when people can find things, you complete tasks, you feel better about your work. Platform isn't just about culture, but sometimes friction will absolutely shape a culture. So, Jenni, when you see stats like the ones I just talked about, where there's a real driver there, platform culture that funded it, or how comms is run, where do you see that balance?
I always say that your tools and your channels are your tangible representation of your culture. So I think if you have an innovative culture, or one of your values is innovation, then working with a platform like Simpplr that's AI powered, like that makes sense, right? In terms of your ability to demonstrate that innovation. If you have innovation as your value and you're just sending PDF packs, then you're not doing that piece, which I think is important. I think the stats are really quite strong here in terms of that 84% versus 67% on productivity, that connection 75% to 58%. They're big gaps, like they're not small, and I think that's really important. But on your point on the friction and that practicality, I was at an event last year where they were talking about digital stress, and it's something I need to read into a bit more. But that digital stress that people have of these little tiny sort of paper cuts that are chipping away at their experience has such a huge impact on well-being. And I think that is part of this as well.
I think this also shows, maybe there's a signal that points to a previous topic that we talked about, where if a leadership team in a company is investing in a platform like this, they're also making other investments.
Yeah.
And I think that's then where that employee experience really does get driven, and the culture then gets improved, versus it being pointing fingers. I can't find this. I don't have access to this. Who knows this? They're making investments far beyond just an intranet, but that intranet could be at one of those core comms investments that they're making.
And this is also about the content, right? It can't just, the tool is one part of that. The content, the people showing up on there, the people engaging, all of that stuff is important. I think there's a worry that you could invest in an intranet, feel like you're ticking a box, and then, I don't need to do anything else. I'll always remember one of my old bosses when I was internal comms manager, and we were launching a new intranet. And after the project was done and it was launched, and she was like, right, that's done now. So what do you do? What's the next project? And I was like, managing this, it's It's not like, that's done, thanks so much. It was that there was no understanding of the work that then came after you built it. And I think that's, it was a long time ago, so hopefully that has disappeared. But I think that's a huge part of this as well.
Yeah. Number 5, 91% have an intranet doesn't necessarily mean it's working. The report calls out an engagement paradox. 91% say they have an intranet and 55% report a fragmented multi-vendor approach. And this is where decisions matter, and this is where partnerships matter inside organization. So often we see these SharePoint graveyards that technically count as a quote unquote intranet, plus a bunch of other tools that are out there. To me, this is like a follow-up question, like almost, what do you mean by intranet? Yeah. Like what is people's mindsets when they say, yes, we have one? So Jenni, when people say we have an intranet, what's the fastest way to tell if it's actually a tool or a hub or a connection platform or simply a document repository?
I think the question after is, if they say, yes, we have an intranet, I'm like, and what tool is that? Because I think once you know the tool, you kind of get more of a sense of how they're using it. And I always find, and we're not here to have a dig at SharePoint, but I always find when people say, oh, we're a Microsoft house, so we've got SharePoint, the complexity of that house and how everything is complex. And I think that makes it very difficult for people to put the governance and use that and everything else. So I think the piece for me is really deep on this around what is it that you want that tool to do? What's the culture? What are you trying to achieve? Do you want the two-way conversation? Do you want just to be a document repository? Because in my view, there's not necessarily a right or wrong. It completely depends on your size, your culture, all of those things to determine what that means. But there has been a bit of chatter, I would say, in the last 6 months to a year of whether or not intranet is a phrase that's disappearing, because it doesn't really explain the tool anymore. And maybe that's part of the challenge.
Usually when people say we're an intranet house, and before they can attempt to justify, I always drop in my condolences.
When they're a Microsoft house. Yeah,
Microsoft. Yeah, like when they're a Microsoft house, like, yes, my condolences. And yeah.
Do you send them a little card in the post?
I should.
with my sympathy.
Number 6, tool sprawl is driving an interest in all-in-one. Among multi-vendor users, 42% said they'd switch to an all-in-one if they could. The report also shows higher employee connection for all-in-one, which is 81% versus 74%. To me, Jenni, the story here isn't, simply one vendor good, multi-vendors bad. It's how do we have fewer handoffs, fewer logins, fewer dead ends? Like, what's that individual employee experiencing out there? That employees don't have to experience your org chart by jumping through all these different hoops to get to places. They actually experience it through a workflow. So when you work with companies, Jenni, what's that hidden cost that you see when there's this tool sprawl that's out there? And they underestimate what that means to that day-to-day employee interacting with those tools.
It comes back a bit to that digital stress piece that I was talking about. But the biggest thing, and we've only recently done some research with a client where we went out and did sort of focus groups across different parts of the organization to understand a bit more about the digital experience for them. And they are a SharePoint house. And the biggest feedback that came back from employees was, I don't know where to go for stuff. Like, I don't know what to go to for here. I don't know where. So in the end, you just stop looking, right? You just go, I just can't find it, or I'll ask someone. So is the biggest cost, because it's time and it is disengagement and it is all of those things. I think the thing that's frustrating about that, I would say as a comms person, is hearing other departments that are part of this not listen to that insight and think, oh, we'll build another tool that's, maybe more HR based for recognition. And oh, we can do chat on here and we can do this. And you're sort of in comms, like pulling your hair. And we've all been there as a comms person, I think, pulling that hair out. And I think that it's getting this message right that I think is hard internally, that all-in-one is maybe better in some ways, but what does that really mean? What is all-in-one? To your point, is it just the more seamless experience for me in a digital world rather than having everything all in one place? And I think you've got to define that to make it really, really clear.
Yeah, and that's the perfect segue, Jenni, to number 7, which is IT often controls the budget, but satisfaction differs by department. The report says 48% report the IC budget is controlled by IT. IT reports 92% satisfaction with intranet functionality versus 76% for other departments. To me, this is a classic translation problem where functionality in IT can mean one thing, things like security, stability, compliance, but to everyone else, it can mean, can we find it? Is it fun to use? Is it fast? Is it not annoying? So Jenni, you're kind of getting into this area, like how should IC and HR work with IT on this ownership so that usability doesn't get lost behind functionality?
And this is so hard. And I think this is probably still hard even today. If I think back in my career, doing so many intranets and digital platforms and all this stuff, and I haven't done that inside an organization for 10 years, but I fear that it's probably still the same. I think the biggest question I ask clients now is, what is the IT strategy? What is the digital workplace strategy outside of the what's the plan? And I would say 80% of the time, nobody can tell me what that is at all. And I think I'm a big one in kind of governance and processes, which I know can feel a bit boring. But I think if we don't have those things, it makes this really hard to measure. And it makes it really hard to actually figure out what we're trying to do. Because if there isn't a strategy that's led from IT in terms of that digital piece, that's, consulted on and worked with comms and HR, it just won't work. And I think you have to have your comm strategy, your digital, all of it has to kind of come together into a pot, and then you have to figure out how it all fits together.
This is where I'd love to see communicators in HR stand up for themselves a bit more. Because just because someone owns the budget does not mean they own the platform. And it's not their money. It's the company's money. So just because someone has it in their budget, that doesn't mean they own it. That just means they paid for it. And so I think this is where you can still talk about true ownership of budget versus platform. And actually, if it's internal comms or HR, whoever owns that intranet presence, own it. Let someone else pay for it, but you're still the ones that own it.
Yeah. And focus on that experience. We've talked about that through the research. Focus on that experience so that if it's not like one platform, that you've integrated enough of that experience so that it feels seamless for the user experience. I think that's the thing to think about, is making sure that you're getting that right. And then it's way easier to spend other people's money because they need to be able to integrate with other things. So it's not really your problem to solve. You're just facilitating that, which is always nice.
Number 8, the top valuable features for an intranet are self-service, analytics, automation, and search. The top capabilities for all-in-one, this is like employee self-service, HR support, advanced analytics, workflow automation, AI personalization, and enterprise search. To me, Jenni, this seems like it's like employees want fewer things to do, fewer forms, fewer tickets, fewer ask your managers. The intranet is becoming the front door oftentimes for so many organizations for getting stuff done versus just that information layer and staying informed. So the number one here was self-service as a top value. How does that change then what good internal communications looks like?
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because this is internal comms people saying they want more self-service, they want more advanced analytics, they want that workflow automation. And I wonder if that's coming from the fact that they feel quite time poor, so they can't maybe do as much support, or maybe it's coming from HR. I don't know. But I think the self-service piece, I always think, is an interesting move, and it's a hard one to get right. Because people can often feel a bit abandoned. So you've got to find that balance there. But I think for the things that are coming up here, what does good internal comms look like? That workflow automation, I think, is interesting in here, because does that mean across the whole organization, or does that mean the workflow of like publishing content on the platform as a comms person? Because that feels like it's more that than the workflow. So it feels like it's all about how do we make things quicker and faster and better that relies less on us as a comms team to do that, which then means that your comms function pivots into that advisory consultancy, that space, that more strategic, all of that stuff that we've talked about. That's where you're kind of going. So your good internal comms becomes this is just going to take care of the day job, but I'm going to be over here helping you make sure this is going to get the outcome that you want. And that's the readiness gap that's kind of being talked about now. That's the gap to kind of plug.
Number 9, targeting is uneven even as overload stays high. Organizations are nearly split. 50% say they can target multiple audiences, 47% target one audience. The report cites a Gartner stat. 38% say comms volume is excessive, and 47% say comms are unrelated for day-to-day work. It also notes that 22% of all-in-one respondents reported access to audience targeting capabilities. So to me, Jenni, there's a disconnect hiding in here. Teams know that relevance is a huge opportunity and issue for them, but they're still broadcasting. They're still praying and spraying this content out there. Sometimes it's a tech problem. Sometimes it's fear someone might miss it. So everyone then gets everything. So what usually blocks targeting, Jenni? Is it capability? Is it governance? Or do you think it is a fear of, oh no, what if I accidentally exclude someone?
I don't think it's that last one. Also, praying and spraying is a horrible phrase. I'm putting that in room 101 if I could. What usually blocks it? It's really made me, it's horrible. I think it's capability, but twofold. I think it's capability from a comms perspective of knowing your audience groups and how to do that. And I think it's a capability on the tech side in terms of the ability to actually do that. I think the governance is also not there. So I think every single person I've spoken to, and bear in mind, I specialize in helping people be less chaotic by helping them communicate better. So I'm going into those environments. There isn't the infrastructure to support the personalization and the targeting and all of that stuff. And I think that's at the root cause of a lot of stuff. And that's not linked to any of the tools you'd be working with. It's the infrastructure within the organization, in the HR systems and all of that stuff that's still not quite there.
Let me explain to you how this praying and spraying works, Jenni, since you're such a fan. Yeah, since you're such a fan. The communicator says a little prayer to whatever communications god or goddess they believe in, that the right people will get it and that it's going to resonate with them and all these things, and then they just spray it out.
Yeah, I know, but the visual I have in my mind is somebody praying whilst they're just peeing everywhere, and it's really upsetting.
That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what we're talking about here. All right, and number 10, AI usage is higher where intranets exist. Orgs with intranets are more positive about AI, 74% versus 48%, and use it weekly or daily more. Top uses are research, summaries, and content generation. The report also says that 71% are confident AI bot tools are used ethically. So Jenni, to me, this is confident is ethical, is doing a lot of work here. Ethical can mean privacy, bias, disclosure, accuracy, whether or not even employees can opt out, IP, all of these things out there. So in a real workplace, what does ethical AI use in internal comms require beyond simply good intentions?
So I think the whole ethical AI thing is still something to be grappled with. And I think we're seeing it now with some of the stuff with Grok and Twitter and deepfakes. And there's so much out in the external world around ethical AI use that I think internally it's got to link to your broader ethics. And I don't know how much work people do on their like kind of ethical communication inside organizations. Like, I don't know whether people have documents that kind of outline what that means, but I think that there's so many layers. Like you said, does this mean bias? Does it mean accuracy? Does it mean like there's so much in there? And I think it's only as we use it are we going to uncover what we really mean and what that really looks like. And I think there'll be different nuances in different places. But I think being aware of it and keeping that judgment and questioning is going to be so important, because if you just believe it, and we've talked about this loads on the podcast on the fact that it can just, what do they call it now? Not hiccups, hallucinations that it has. So I think there's 71% of confident AI tools are used ethically. I don't even, like you said, I don't even really know what that means.
If you have an ethical workforce, you have to believe that your employees are using AI ethically. I think, again, this is another signal to me, because we've talked about a lot on the podcast about how organizations are or are not using AI. I think companies being very clear if this is how we are using it, this is how we are not using it. And those orgs with intranets, again, that's another signal that those investments are being made. So going back to that stat, organizations with intranets are more positive about AI, 74% versus just 48%.
Yeah.
So organizations without intranets are not as positive. Those that do have them are. To me, that's that other signal around other investments being made, probably around AI rollouts, training, all of those things that we've talked about on the podcast before. I think that's another interesting signal.
Yeah, but there's just still so much of it, isn't there? And I think that's the bit that's hard. We see so many big stats about AI use, yet the reality, I think, is still not quite there. And I think that's the bit that still needs some work. But that percentage difference is huge.
That wraps up our 10 takeaways, a top 10 list from Simpplr's State of the Intranet Internal Communications Report in 2025. In the show, we will include a link where you can go download your own copy. Would love to hear from all of you what your takeaways have been from this report. We want to thank Simpplr for this bonus episode. Jenni, as we always do, let's talk about our freak out. So Jenni, what are you freaking out about?
So I'm having a little freak out this week because we are all systems go for our comms reboot event in London this year. So I am getting excited about launching that this month. It's in October in London. I'm super excited. So I've been spending the last few days kind of getting prepped for that. This is the unconference that I run. So once tickets are available, I'll obviously share that a bit more, but it's going out to my mailing list exclusively next week. So yeah, very excited about that. Although I've had my head in Zapier and you and I have talked about how wonderful that is as an experience off podcast. So
for those that aren't clear, she's being sarcastic about the wonderful experience.
Thank you for explaining sarcasm. Yes. Always grateful.
Yes. Well, I see your comms reboot, and I raise you the X Factor Summit at Transform that I'm leading at the end of March. So Transform is an employee experience conference in Las Vegas at the end of March. I have attended 2 years ago. I partnered with them last year, and this year I'm leading a day-long summit for communicators at it. So I'll include a link for those that want to join us there. It is free for anyone who is going to Transform. It does not add any cost to the event, but prices do go up January 23rd. So if you want to join, you have to sign up through my link in order to make sure you have a seat for our X Factor Summit. Again, that is on March 23rd in beautiful Las Vegas. So I hope you all can join us at that. And then go to Jenni's event in London later on in the year. Thank you for joining us for this special bonus episode. All the content that has inspired this conversation will be in the show notes, and do not forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can also find Frequency on YouTube. Thank you to my friend Poet Ali for contributing music to the show. We're back every Monday with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.